We've got some questions for the panel that we think are going to be really serving you greatly. And the first one is remote hybrid distributed workforce a trend or is it here to stay? And what is the language that would lead to a better comprehension of remote, in-office, hybrid distributed workforce? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, I think distributed was a term that existed already before the other terms were used. It's also a term that qualifies a team rather than the other words that qualify individuals. And I think it's rather something about something collective rather than individual. So that's why I'd rather go for this stable term that we can harness in this fast evolving and fast changing world we are in.
Can I ask a question to the audience? For you guys, how many work at companies with fewer than 20 people? Okay, 20 to 100. All right, 100 to 5. More. Anyone bigger? Who's the biggest? Just, how many? 7,000. Can anyone beat 7,000? Going once. What do you got? 10,000. Beat it. 12. So, okay, so you had a prize, right? So I wonder, when we think about is this here to stay, right, or is this a trend? How does that change by company size? Why I brought it up. So in my startup, people are everywhere, right? So when I run Whomi Whomi stands for who am I? Like, what am I going to be next in my career? No one understands it. But as a distributed software startup, people can be everywhere, and I love that I can grab talent all over the place. Working in a 65,000 person global enterprise, it's a little bit different. And so I really like that we have the trend of being able to find talent everywhere. When I found my last leader I was looking for, I looked all over the planet for someone who could do like a really specific lead a big team, probably a couple thousand people just on that team. And the person I found was in Manchester in the UK. And I don't have an office anywhere near Manchester in the UK. So, but he was exactly who we wanted. We got him on board. He has been nothing but phenomenal. And I don't care if he lives on Mars, which I guess maybe he could someday. But it's great. And so I think that we have that pull. However, I see the pull from a lot of these. I mean, because we all work for pretty big companies, right? We have real estate. We have offices. We have things. And there's some pull to come back. And whether we're good about using it, to say this is just we're going to use the workspace as a connection space, an event space, versus it's where you go every day to put on headphones. I mean, if I had everybody on my team in the same room, that would probably be best. But worst is everybody going into a place, sticking on some headphones and talking to people not in the building, right? That just seems like an insane thing to do at this stage. So I don't know where the trend is going to last, but I do think something about organization size will have an impact.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit. I think distributed work there's a long trajectory. It's been going on. It's a function of globalization. It just refers to how teams are spread out, and I don't see anything necessarily interfering with that. Having said that, I do think we should expect a certain counterbalance to that over the next few years. I mean, we've seen a global rise of nationalism, and you can't escape some of the effects of that. So I don't think it'll be uncommon for organizations to begin to want to see more co-located hubs. But having said that, just the nature of the tech we use and the desire to hire is going to cause any organization, even if it is very small, to have employees or customers or vendors that are in a broader array of locations. So distributed to me is very useful. The term hybrid for us, and I have a group of researchers, but also a group of advisors around the world who help plan spaces, home workspaces, but often hospitals, schools. The term hybrid's become very counterproductive. It's useful to describe a work location policy, like it's a hybrid policy, but to refer to a hybrid team or a hybrid office or even hybrid work, it creates a lot of ambiguity. Like I can't send a researcher into a space like an ethnographer and have them be like, look, it's hybrid work. I mean, it's just it's just a bunch of accountants, but 3 of them aren't there. So that's why distributed is so much more useful and remote as a function of work from home. So personally, I'd love it if, maybe we wouldn't focus on it so much, because in very practical business terms, I mean, we sell furniture and textiles and other things for environments, and I've seen organizations get so hung up on, I don't really know what that means, that they don't proceed with otherwise very sound plans. Yeah.
So, as a segue to that, what would be some of the structural changes now that need to be anticipated for the distributed work and really making it engageable?
Well, one of the things we have discussed a lot yesterday and this morning is around the agentic and what is coming. We're going to have intelligence on tap. And so what is it going to change in people and organization? I think that's the big change coming.
I'll just add, and I guess I'm probably taking liberties with structural. The biggest thing that determines whether an organization can effectively support distributed teams is how you train the managers. I mean, to see a team go from mostly co-located to distributed, or even from a small group of distributed to a larger one, means you've got to have a manager that knows how to create inclusion, how to not basically be guilty of digital proximity bias, or a whole host of other things that can cause people to just fall off the grid. And so being inclusive, being participatory, if you're familiar with Douglas McGregor's framework, being a theory Y manager in a time of distributed employees, like, it takes training, and most organizations haven't done it.
I'll give you maybe 2 or 3 of these. So one, I think structurally, how we use workspaces is going to change. So just as a story, one of our biggest sites in the U.S. is in Houston, so down the road. So I was down in Houston, and I was meeting with a friend of mine who's the site leader. So he's like the senior guy at our whole Houston site, and we're trying to get together to go meet in a conference room. And there were no conference rooms for the two of us, right? And he's the leader of the site. And then we went up to the upper floors where all the individual desks were, and they were empty. So everybody's using the sites to meet. Like when they need to come together, they come together somewhere, they meet, they work on something, then they go back because you don't need to like work standing next to another person, but you like sometimes are collaborating that way. So we're gonna flip how we handle the actual real estate to make it more as an event meeting space, so we have more of that and less of the unused standing around rooms. So I think we'll probably end up, I don't know, probably 1,700 conference rooms by like with digital capabilities by the end of the year. That's probably number one. That's really loud. Number 2, I think how we onboard new people has to change. So I don't know if any of you have kids who are getting internships yet. I have my oldest daughter is now starting the real world. And I feel really bad talking at a running remote panel that I encouraged her to go work at a place she could go work in person. That seems bad, right? Like, because I believe very passionately in letting people go where they are, but I don't think we've cracked the code on how you train people yet really well. I mean, we can cope with it. But I really think there's more we can do together to say, like, how do you have just sit in on the meeting with me? And like, come on, let me just take you along with it the way that you can in person. So I think we structurally have to think about that differently. And then the third one I would just say, I think Ryan is spot on that hybrid can't be, there's some benefit to being in a space 2 days a week and not 3. Like, that doesn't matter at all. Being able to have types of work when you need to be face-to-face and types of work when you don't, not on some schedule. I hope we're evolving to that stage now.
I think there's some ambiguity also on how to repurpose those spaces. So for you going in and having that aha moment, and when we had spoken earlier, you had an aha moment with your employees also, your team lead, so I'd like for you to share that also. But how can we help disseminate information just as concerned professionals that want to support one another? You know, here's some things that we're trying, because I really don't know that people know what to do with those workspaces right now.
Now you're talking my language, so that's pretty much what our team is dedicated to doing. The good news is there's been decades worth of precedents. I'm thinking right now of like Anderson Consulting in the 90s. I'm looking at my friend Phil Kirshner back there, who's been around as long as I have, deciding that because their people were at clients 3 or 4 days a week, they needed to create a connective hub that built community and allowed for different sort of relationship building. It's not a new thing. The challenge is most people, when they think of an office, have a very defined view of what that is, and many don't like it, and I understand why. The origins of the office were all about supervising work and expressing status. If you got a chance to visit Atlassian's facility on Monday, I mean, there's an example of an organization that went distributed, told their employees they never have to come to an office again, and have expanded their real estate footprint and are building a new headquarters in Sydney. So if we reimagine these spaces, and I can get, if you're interested, much more specific about the types of spaces, co-creative project spaces, cafes, event spaces, to bring people together. Interestingly, desks are still super important because the asynchronous nature of our tech means we need to flip from, hey, great to see you all, I need 2 hours with this spreadsheet, leave me alone. Now I'm coming back into the mix. But that reallocation of real estate, when people experience it, often go like, oh, okay. And many organizations that do this don't even call them offices anymore. I mean, you heard terms yesterday like Nest, Hub, Studio, but they're evolved offices, and they're built primarily to strengthen relationships, not to support staring at screens all day long, although that's part of what we do. They're there to help basically cover off on the limitations of what the tech just can't allow us to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was going to, sorry, my team story. I'm dominating the mic. But real quick, I'll tell you. I have a team of about 25. We're in 21 different cities. We, as many of you do, have an employee engagement survey that we take very seriously. So last year I allocated a bunch of funds for professional development because that's where the team said that they wanted it. And then a few weeks ago, 4 of my team members happened to be in the same building where I was in Michigan. And they were so excited to just like serendipitously be in the same space that over dinner, one of them said to me, can you take those funds and allocate them for us to just come and work out of this facility in Michigan? We call it Design Yard. It's our innovation center. And I was like, sure. Like, is that something that people don't feel like they can do? And there was like this aha moment where he said, well, people will wait until there's something organized, but what they really want is just to be able to, on their own terms, be present and connect and reach out to the people they want to reach out to. And I don't know why, I was like so dumbfounded. It never occurred to me that any of my team members wouldn't just book a ticket to come and spend a week or 2 working at a Design Yard. But once he said it, I'm like, of course they wouldn't. Like, I need to enable this. And so, that money will shift over and we'll make the most out of those times. But studying this stuff, you would have thought that would have occurred to me at some point.
It did occur to you when you had that happening, right?
Yeah, I wanted to add that, and we repeat that for a certain number of things. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It really, the spaces, they need to accommodate a lot of different possibilities. And having this flexibility with the furnitures, having the flexibility thanks to the technology, this is what really matters. They shouldn't be like all same spaces and fixed spaces, but things that you can move around for all types of needs.
Anything? Okay. So this brings us into a nice segue. How can leaders, managers, realize how to empower their distributed workforces and have them engage in being creative and innovative in determining how it is they would like to work, listening to that input, but providing the insights that you had an aha moment over to say, hey, this is okay, tell us what you need, what would you like to do?
Okay, I'll add something on that one. I think one of the interesting things about how you engage that changes when we're working remote, everything can become so transactional, right? You click into a meeting, you click out of a meeting, you click into a meeting, you click out of a meeting, it just goes back and forth, and then you're doing your work time. So HP was founded with this policy. I mean, people have heard of open door policies before, right? Like, it means something a little different at HP. So we still actually preserve the founders' offices at our headquarters, which is sort of a little weird thing to do. But what's funny about it is if you go into the founder, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, you go into their offices in Palo Alto, and you look behind the doors, which is something you would not normally do, but the floor behind the open door is not faded the same way as the floor around the rest of the room, because the sunlight came in on the rest of it, and they always had their doors open, so people would just like pop in and talk to Bill and Dave, right? So we really treat this like open door policy of we want people to reach out, we want people to engage. And we find that with this remote, like it works well, it's very efficient, but you lose some of the serendipity of being able to just have people come in and talk. And so one of the things that I try to do within my organization, I'll reach out to the individual who is, I know is doing something, or I'll hear about it, I'll just like ping them to be talking like all the way. And at a big company, people are used to very strong hierarchies and how do things work. And you just have to blow all of that up, right? The same way Bill and Dave did it by leaving their doors open. And I'll just go reach out to the staff person driving something. I'd be their fifth line manager and say, like, let's talk about this. And I heard about it. And it's weird because the first time you do it, they think they're in trouble, which is sort of funny. But then when they get used to it, all of a sudden it starts to change the culture. And you're hearing things come up and down through the entire organization in a good way, because we treat it like, we need to treat it like we're there, like you're knocking on a door saying, can I just talk to you for a second? But it's a little bit different. So that's some of the things we try to do.
Yeah, I'll add a few thoughts. One is we need to get away from days per week. Like, it's just such a counterproductive, arbitrary way to center the conversation. I think team leaders can find a lot more value in saying, are we finding the right balance of time together or time working apart? And secondarily, and this is not synonymous with the first, are we finding the right balance of screen time and off-screen time? I'm no Luddite, but if you look at like the effects of too much screen time, it increases burnout, it increases social isolation, it decreases psychological safety. Like, we're not meant to be staring at screens all day long. We did this in the 80s with desktop computing, but now the screens follow us and they're with us. And so I think the counterbalance to that is just being able to have really good quality in-person interactions, hence why the world's leaders in remote work still get together in the same place and have drinks and hang out. I also think that there's some usefulness in trying to understand the ways that organizational systems work. So I'll get slightly geek researchy on you. Some of you may have heard the framework of strong ties and weak ties. This is from the sociologist Mark Granovetter in the 70s. Basically, it describes our networks as people that we're really close to, our friends, our family, our partner. Those are strong ties. Those are who we rely on a daily basis. But this concept of weak ties, like these extended relationships, our acquaintances, the people that we don't see every time. Like, if you've hugged somebody here, that's probably you strengthening a weak tie. Weak ties are super critical for our sense of security, belonging, purpose, and it's also how innovation happens across teams. And so asking questions of teams like, what other teams do you know you should be working more closely with but aren't, is a gateway towards a whole lot better interaction than, did you badge in 3 days a week? Like, I'd be thrilled if we never had that conversation again in my life. So it needs to be more purposeful about time apart, time together, time on screen, time off screen, and who are you interacting with?
Yeah, and I wanted to add about these things we discussed here in the past years at this conference. It's intentional togetherness. This intentional togetherness is a habit that all leaders should really embrace, role modeling it so that it becomes a habit for everybody. And I liked how, I think it's Aduna who talked about that earlier. She said, and I want to echo what she said, connect by design, not by accident. I really loved that. So keeping that reframing, because that's really essential.
All right, so on that same vein, how do organizations keep the not out of sight, out of mind when it comes to career development, recognition, and influence?
Yeah, on that one, of course, beyond setting really well-defined goals so that you have transparency and fairness for all the things around compensation and benefits, I think training, what you talked about it, training leaders on the proximity bias is really essential. But I like also what we did in my company this year. We put the employees in the driver's seat of their career with an event that we called the Talent Week event, or Career Week event, where we had a lot of sessions. It was a global event where we had testimonials from executives down to leaders of engineering, sharing about how moving is boosting their career. We had mini trainings on different career path possibilities. So really empowering the employee to use all what is available to really drive their own career in the company.
I love this topic because career development is really important to me. I think so many times we overlook the potential in our people, and people overlook the potential in each of us, right? And it's because we see but a snapshot of everyone, right? You see exactly what someone's doing. You might not know their history, you don't know their background, you don't know all these other areas. And sometimes if you take one view of a person and say, here is my history, well, that's generic. It's one view of yourself. If I said, here's my history as a design leader and just talked about what I could do as a design person, but here's what I could do as an architect, here's what I could do as an engineer, here's what I could do as a product person, you don't that's not all the same. And if you talk about your one history and you talk about everything you've ever done, the most successful thing you've done in your career might be completely irrelevant to the person who you want to have hire you. So one of the things that we do very deliberately, I do this with my startup and I do this with my team with my startup, is have every person try to figure out what are the 2 or 3 things they might do next. And they have to be explicit. And it's actually really challenging because I realize a lot of people don't make it a multiple choice test. You might do A, B, or C. And a good test is to go say, just write down everything you might want to do. And people are like, well, it's overwhelming. I could do 1,000 things. And nobody gets to 20. And then when you say really cross out the ones you probably don't want, they're usually like at 5, right? So it's not, feels overwhelming, but when you actually go after it, it gets down to it. And then for each of the things they might want to do, we talk about what is the person who would hire you for that, what are they going to look for in that job? Right? What are they, not about you, I don't care about you, I care about what is the person who's going to hire you for that role going to look for in you. How do we highlight those skills in your history just related to that? Exclude all the other things that might be amazing, but just related to that. And I have every person on my team has at least 3 areas they might go for, at least 3. And for each of them, I know what their stories are and I know where their gaps are. And so every quarter, I talk to every person about how are we filling in gaps in your narrative and how am I connecting you to other people in the company so that you have a chance to find those. But like it has to be mechanical because it is not as opportunistic as it was when we worked in a different way. And I'm finding the first challenge is with the employees to actually think about it that way. But then once you've forced them to have that mindset, all of a sudden they start realizing what they want to do. And then me as a leader, I can give them assignments and say, why don't you work on this project because it might give you a great story to tell relevant to someone else. But you have to force the out of sight, out of mind to actually showcase potential for people they wouldn't see.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing, which is I think anytime we're talking distributed teams, goal-based performance metrics are key. But you should, as an employee, be able to look right up those goals, just like you do an org chart, to say, well, I'm supposed to be achieving these 3 things this quarter because our team's trying to do this, because our department's trying to do this, because the company's trying to do this. And it gives visibility into, like, I'm a part of something, which is important. But more importantly, or just as importantly, it gives you a sense of what else you might be able to do to contribute to those higher level goals. So if we don't have that sort of thing, people default to other much more arbitrary means of performance measurement. I mentioned presenteeism. It can happen physically. It can happen digitally. Like, you don't want just those that are quickest to respond or closest to you to be getting unfair career advantages. You want people who are understanding the goals of the organization and finding creative ways of contributing to it.
And how do we encourage people to assume responsibility for their own career paths?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, okay, show of hands. How many people in the last week put serious thought into what their next career step was going to be? Okay, yeah, that's more than most, right? But it's really hard because it's never urgent. It's extremely important, right? We spend 90,000 hours of our lives working, right? It's more than anything but sleep, right? So it's a huge amount of our lives, and it's so easy to let it happen to you. Right? You're in there, you're doing things, you're reacting, you're not driving. And to get people to take responsibility and go push it, it's very hard, right? So I'm building some mechanical items in there to say, I am going to checkpoint with you every so often. I'm going to say, did you do it? I'm going to give you something concrete to try to hold people accountable. I think is really, really important. The separation between those who do and those who don't aren't there, but it's a difficult one.
I do think we can work to mitigate the risk of it a little bit. So I'll give you a personal example. In 2015, I took this role within Herman Miller, and I was just terrible at it. I could tell 90 days in, this job was not what I thought. It needed a whole bunch of skills that I'm terrible at. And so I went to my manager at the time, and his name was Greg. I was like, hey, Greg, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he was like, I don't think you're very good at this either. And he was like, should we work on finding you a role where you're going to be really good at it? And I was like, yes. And we did. And so we found something else. And I happened to mention this on LinkedIn 2 years ago. It became, by far my most ever clicked on, viewed, responded to post with a bunch of people saying, I would never do that. And I guess that comes back to the idea of psychological safety. But I guess having an organization where you can try a few things, and if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of your career, is pretty critical.
Yeah, and as you said, as it's hard, anytime you have a habit to change and it's hard, especially when we are so focused on operational work, it should come from the leader. The leader should open that type of question, open to that type of question. And that's excellent what you are doing to encourage them to envision possibilities. That's really awesome. But it should come from the leader, I guess, because it authorizes or it sets the right mindset.
Yeah, so just by a show of hands from the audience, how many of you all, if we're reimagining the future of work, how many of you all think that there could or perhaps should be a movement towards giving people information as they're onboarded about you're in charge of taking responsibility for your role? What do you like to do? To Ryan's point, hey, you know what? I don't think I'm very good at this. Thanks for the opportunity, but I'm not sure that this is what I'm suited to do. Fortunately, he had a good boss that was like, yeah, okay, well, let's find you something else. Or do we just need to stretch your skills a bit? So how many of you, by a show of hands, would encourage people as you're onboarding them? Yeah, I mean, this is the future, right? It's not, here's your manual, this is how we've always done it. We have the beautiful opportunity to really reimagine the future of the work. And as leaders, and you are all leaders here, that's part of our responsibility to instill that curiosity and that ability to want to innovate within our employees, new and seasoned employees as well, because they can get a little stagnant too sometimes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for that. That was awesome. Let's see. Where do we want to go? How do we preserve the connection, the human connection, and the human connection and emotional intelligence in a digital-first workplace?
It's a good question. I will pick up where I left off before, which is technology is an amazing gift, and we need to leverage it to its full potential and then recognize when there's a law of diminishing returns and where it's gone too far. And so right now, the sort of things our team is concerned about are loneliness, isolation, burnout, a loss of sense of belonging, as I mentioned, a decrease in psychological safety. Because at a certain point, only interacting digitally just produces really negative effects. That's not to say that the tools we use aren't incredibly valuable. It's just we weren't necessarily meant to live on them. So I'm pretty biased because I've dedicated my career to understanding the value of being in physical locations. And I'm not just talking about offices, but I mean, there's some enormously beneficial things that come from being able to see people talk, have a nice conversation, eye to eye, eat together, learn from each other, have unstructured, content-rich conversations. And so I still think it's a balance, basically, of saying digital first or remote doesn't mean that we're not spending really good quality time together. I do think most organizations benefit from having real estate and from really strategic use of that real estate. But you got to find the balance. There's also certain job types. I mean, if I were like a computer programmer working on code all day, I might be able to find a lot of that interpersonal enrichment in my community. I don't necessarily need that to be with coworkers, but you get other types of work that's more interdependent, where you really need to be able to have a certain degree of trust that your teammates are working on things and they've got your back. And then you need to find ways of spending more time together. Pretty predictable answer from the office furniture guy then.
Yeah, we need to really balance well the in real life and the digital part of the work. So that's why intentional togetherness is important. We need to be clear on what happens best when we are together physically or when we are together virtually. So really think about these things, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, not at all. We also need to sharpen our listening skills to see the nuances. It's already very complex in real life to understand our different communication styles. So to catch them really on the virtual side, it's even harder. And I liked how Ebony earlier today talked about decoding. I really like this reframing, decoding our culture, decoding our environment. So that's certainly a new skills that we need to develop. And meetings are our playground. I think there's a lot of room for improvement whether the meetings are in person, hybrid, or virtual. They are our playgrounds to develop emotional intelligence and sharpen those skills.
I think one of the great benefits of being remote is the time it gives you to do other things and figuring out ways to celebrate how everyone uses their time, what's special about them. So I've got a guy who likes to do long distance bike rides, and we'll start our staff meetings and he'll show pictures of where he was biking, on the coast of England. I'm like, it's pretty beautiful, right? But we'll share these stories. I've got a bunch of guitars in my office, so I'll like pick up a guitar between meetings. One I bought right on Congress over there. But figuring out how do you use your time, what are the things that you're doing, and sort of celebrating that, right? Because I do think this is where, for most people, it's helped their lives become much more enriched. They're still doing high quality, high performing work, but they've been able to integrate their life into it in a much better way, and not just making that the thing that happens outside and work is work, but actually driving in and celebrating and talking about that with each other becomes pretty powerful. So we do a lot of that type of sharing to build the connection.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think work-life balance has always been a misnomer, right? I mean, there's no balance there. But how do we promote even a bit more, since you all brought up play? The research has shown that play really increases the ability to perform better when we can have, even adults, we like to play, we like to have fun. But in the office, a lot of times it was, we can't play, we can't have fun about learning or implementing something. What are your thoughts on incorporating play into the workplace and engaging people in that manner and celebrating what they have achieved through that?
It can be very powerful. It just has to be right for the culture of your organization. So, shameless plug for our podcast about place. I had the head of workplace innovation from Lego, Tim Arnsbach, on last year. And they talked a lot about how even opening up meetings, they'll do these little activities, which may or may not involve Lego bricks. But it's meant to try to be able to create a certain degree of fun and interesting interaction. I was with my colleague Beth this morning, who has a business here in Austin called SKG, and you recently did the Easter egg hunt, which was it sounds like it was quite competitive and quite spirited. I do think there's an element of that that's really powerful. But having said that, I also think that there's just a certain line where it becomes forced fun and really weird. And so you really got to try to figure that out for each organization.
It's true that employees have a lot to learn all the time. They have to pick up with a lot of things. I would differentiate the things that are around knowledge. We can still leverage training, but maybe different versions of training, smaller ones, short videos that come back more often so that you progressively have them learn. And it feels light because we don't have the time or we cannot put too much of effort in training anymore. Definitely sandbox place to play. We do that for learning how to prompt with AI. Microsoft is providing their Prompt Buddy app, and people really like that. So it's a sense of play with that. And I would say there are other things that are more difficult to change, which are habits. We need to completely change and rethink the way we work, and this is more about changing habits. This is where we are using a different type of thing, which is behavioral change, and it's a lot leveraging the role modeling of the leaders to change the way we behave.
It's an interesting question. I don't know that we're very good at playing, honestly. I don't know that we incorporate it very well into our areas. We incorporate beyond work areas, which I think is really important. So when we're distributed, we celebrate a lot of holidays, and we've done that before. Whatever holiday is, whoever is celebrating that tradition, they might do something, and the whole team will kind of participate in it, and that has been useful. When people get together, we do try to make sure at least half the time of our together is not working. It's building your, what did you call them, weak and strong ties, trying to strengthen those ties. So it's almost the speed of trust style. So that's funny when it develops a little more organically. I was at a leadership retreat with a bunch of the other senior members of the team, and there was a piano over in the corner, and some of us started playing around. By the end of the night, when you have everybody live singing to Bon Jovi, right, screaming, is you end up with a lot more connections after you've yelled "Living on a Prayer" at the top of your lungs. But like again, I like your point about is it forced or is it not, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's hard to do.
Yeah, those are just trust-based shared experiences. But looking at you, I'm thinking about tech a little bit. I do think because the consumerization of tech has impacted organizations, when it comes to adopting new tech, play is incredibly useful. That's how I adopt new technologies. I goof around with it until I feel comfortable using it. I think giving somebody a new technology at work and asking them to jump into a project is intimidating. And years ago, when we adopted Microsoft Teams, I created a fake team called Blackbriar because I'm a big Jason Bourne fan. And I actually invited all my employees to basically get on Microsoft Teams for a certain amount of time, like 90 minutes. Like, go post a GIF, create a document. Like, you're not going to screw anything up. And I had one team member after like a half an hour, was like, do I need to keep doing this? I'm like, do you feel comfortable using it like on a real project? He was like, I got it. But we did the same thing for Miro. Like, the first time I jumped into a Miro board, somebody had built it out for hours, and I'm like, I'm not touching this freaking thing. But then I went and created a separate one. I was goofed around until I was like competent. So I think as a training exercise, particularly with tech, play is really important.
It kind of takes the fear out of if I touch that button or if I move this, what's going to happen? Am I going to crash the system? Okay.
Until you crash the system.
You've got those fail safes. Let's see. What about how leaders can model and promote those good mental health habits, whether they're in the workplace, working remotely, or in that hybrid kind of distributed workplace? That's a huge push right now. The mental health space, the psychological safety. So, what are some best practices that you can offer up?
Yeah, I can share on what we do with behavioral change. This is how I learned how important the role modeling of leader can be. Actually, the leader, by role modeling, is role modeling the good behaviors, can really send signals to the people that this is acceptable and this is the way to do it. So typically by setting clear boundaries, by showing that you take time for thinking or take time for breaks and you leave early to spend time with your family, you're planting seeds, sending good signals. But what is also important is to close the door to the bad behaviors or to the behaviors of the past, so that you send the signals that this is not acceptable anymore. And you can do that by just refraining from sending chat outside of working hours, or making a comment when somebody is working during the weekend, this type of thing, so that they are not acceptable anymore. So you set different boundaries.
Yeah, I'll add a few things too. We actually just finished a really significant research project on nurse burnout. Like, if you look at the number of nurses that are getting out of the profession and how unsafe and burned out they feel, one of the things we concluded was that it's great to be able to provide some respite and a break, but if your workday is so unbelievably stressful, there's nothing 20 minutes is going to do. Like, you really have to empower people with enough agency and priorities to say the work itself has to be sustainable. That's the phrase we use within my team a lot. Are we achieving sustainable productivity? Meaning, yeah, there's going to be those highs and lows, but do you feel like at your current pace 6 months from now, you're still going to be good? When it comes to physical environments, which I haven't talked as much about today, there's been a major emphasis on trying to understand respite and well-being and emotional and cognitive needs within the office. We've had a 12-year inclusive design research project that has looked at all sorts of different user groups. And if we go, in fact, I was in one this morning, if you go and you take a look at like a really great respite or wellness space, it should be a place to step away from the stress of the workday. It should help somebody that might be on the neurodivergent spectrum decrease their sensory load. We've looked at how it can help women in menopause and perimenopause deal with brain fog, veterans deal with PTSD, those with anxiety disorders. Like, there's a lot of people that just really struggle with the constant demands of the workday. And I'll say, being in a busy office sometimes can really be a negative contributor to that. So if that's an expectation, signaling to people, we get it, we know you're stressed, we've got spaces here, they're for you, you don't have to leave here, it signals to them that if it's about being together, they shouldn't view it as such a pressure-filled, stressful situation that they can't escape it.
I think there's a lot of the role modeling, I like you said, Corinne, when we look at this, really being able to shut off when we were running remote, right? Because it's very easy to stay on. It's actually we've now proven the whole fact that you can run remote means you can work from anywhere. You can work from the beach. You can work from right here. I could take a call while I'm not answering a question. But that doesn't mean it's a good thing to do, right? And I think we have to model that just because we can, we shouldn't deliberately. And so making those times of like actually saying we're cutting out, like I'm not here. When I go on vacation, I could see everything. I could probably respond to all of it, respond to none of it, right? And actually encourage our teams to, when they're out, be out. And the other way that I try to do this with our team is I said, look, I want you to be able to be completely out because I want your team to be able to do your job. If the people on your team can't do your job for a week, how are you ever going to leave your job and how am I going to promote them to do it? So if they have to be able to make the decisions that you have to do for your entire year for a week. So like your job is make sure you have people who can do your job for 5 days, 10 days, and then be gone. And I don't want to hear from you. If I hear from you because you need to jump in, you haven't helped your team develop, right? And that's actually looking at all of us. So like figuring out how we check out in small bursts and then how we check out in longer bursts and use it it's not just about us. It's about our job as leaders to help groom other people to take on these responsibilities. I think that gives you a little extra reason to resist the temptation to just send one more quick IM.
Simply because I'm sending you an email at 2 a.m. doesn't mean you have to respond to it. Well, then don't do it. Because people will want to respond to it, right? So.
Delayed send is a really good cheating trick.
Yes, it is. With the time that we have left, I want us to delve into AI since that is becoming so integrated and so important. And so I'm just going to open it generally for you all in your areas of expertise to share your thoughts on it, what the best practices are that you are looking at, some trends that can be meaningful for our audience.
I think it's going to be very transformative for all of us. We're seeing it already across lots of functions. But today, actually, for the very first time, I saw someone build an org chart that had their AI agents on the org chart. Has anybody seen that before? I thought that was actually pretty incredible. So they're like, here's what we do in product management, and I have a competitive analyst agent. And they had kind of built something that was going to go look at it. And then here's what I'm doing over here in proposal writing. I've got something that does this. And they were literal roles. And so, not just having tools, but actually thinking about it as, can I take this whole function and move the responsibility? I think that's actually a pretty powerful way to look at it. I've seen lots of examples, but never someone go that far before. So it sounds like you have as well. So I'd love to hear your experience. But I think it was a pretty good move. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it happening.
Well, in my company, we've been one of the first adopters of Microsoft Office 365 Copilot. We have a pretty good level of adoption, 95% of adoption, and people are reporting 1 hour and a half of productivity per week, so that's huge. Now, if we want to go beyond that, the mindset of being digital first, of being more explicit and documenting further a lot of things that are verbal or that are still too implicit could really help us move forward with something that is helping on different types of use case. So beyond search or content creation, going to learning, analysis, help to decision making, any kind of professional support. And I'm also in touch with the companies that are working on some innovations on how to capture these informal talks. So we should watch the technology. I've heard about wearables that we could all have to say, okay, would you be okay if I record this informal discussion so that I transcribe it with my AI and I ask my agent to document that and capture that for me? That could also be my own memory, right? Because I'm not so good as you see. I have my notes. I would have everything with me and all the memory of my discussion with me. So these things are technically feasible. And I've heard about experiment about that. Talking about spaces, I think we need to be ready to test new kind of technology for the office, because if this kind of technology becomes available, it means it could also change the dynamic of the office spaces.
Yeah, I mean, we look at AI from a variety of standpoints. We're looking at it in terms of how it changes physical environments, not just offices, but other places. We look at it in terms of the kind of professions we're involved with, including interior design, et cetera. But our biggest focus is how it changes work. And for me, and I used to be VP of Digital Innovation at Herman Miller, one of our companies, before I took this role. I think the question that organizations should be talking about at a leadership level is, how do you reinvest the time saved if it's achieved? Because it can quickly become an arms race. I'll give you a quick example. In 2017, we found out that 2 members of our accounts payable team at Herman Miller were spending about 40% of their time, like literally taking invoices we were supposed to paying and manually going through it, entering the information. And one of my colleagues, Mark's like, let's build a couple bots. We'll give them names, they'll pay our bills. And it created a little bit of a stir. There was kind of like, what happens if the bot adds a 0 and we pay way more than we thought we would? And our response was, more likely the person's going to add the 0 than the bot. And so, long story short, we did it. But we at one point came to an agreement with the head of accounts payable that if we gain this 40% back, do not get rid of either of these people. Like, ask what you could do with their 40%. And as it turns out, they were really good at like dealing with vendors and doing more supply chain kind of negotiations. And so it worked out. We used their human skills really well. But my concern is that for 100 years or longer, there's been all these predictions about how technology will save us time and that we'll be leading lives of leisure. By and large, any time savings within a competitive business environment has resulted in people being asked to do twice as much and being even more burned out. And so if we get back to this idea of sustainable productivity, like if you get a gain, we should be looking to like, what are people really good at? And so I'll bring it back to the physical environments. Like when we start thinking about AI taking over more rote, predictable like things, it actually frees people up to do a little bit more of the creative, the conversational, the intersectional problem solving. But that's assuming that some CEO or senior VP or somebody else is going to say, that's the kind of work I hope you do more of. Otherwise, they're just going to see their workload increase by whatever proportion the tool took over.
And some of the concerns within organizations are the regulations, and in the healthcare, maybe it's HIPAA. In universities, it is personal information, and you can add others in other kinds of organizations. So how do we address how AI can be a benefit in those types of situations rather than it being a hindrance?
Well, establish governance and ethics. I think that's what we are doing in my company. We started with an early adopter, so catching up with it, but now we are a little bit organizing things and making sure everything is well governed.
I think it's going to take a while for this to catch up. But the example you just mentioned, Corinne, earlier of the one that's recording you all the time that I did not sign up for, there was an article on that today I read, and it was talking about how even states are different. Some states you have to have both people who are being recorded have to sign up to say, yeah, I'm okay that this is happening. And in some states, it's only one person. So if you're wearing it and you decide to record it, you can record all of us, and that's fine. Other places you can't, right? So there's a lot of this change in requirements in different jurisdictions. I think we've got a lot to come through still till we figure out what happens. We saw, what was the other lawsuit that was on about being sued because an agent came up with something that wasn't true about you. And it brought, so can you do that or not? What happens? So there's still a lot, I think, that it's unraveling in this. It's going to take some time for us to figure out the right path.
And I have nothing useful to add.
That's all right. That was useful. Okay, so let's wrap up before we go to questions from the audience. What's on the forefront of each of your minds in ways that individuals within organizations that are in leadership positions can help to shape this reimagined future of work?
I'll bring up one that we just haven't talked about much, which is for years, we've been waiting for employers to be a little bit more intentional about helping people to have really healthy, productive work-from-home experiences. And it, by and large, hasn't happened. Now, don't get me wrong, we work with organizations that want to create great offices. And sometimes when those spaces are half empty, they don't want to spend a lot of time focused on home. But imagine that 30%, 40%, 50% of your organizational productivity is happening in a space outside of your governance. So providing some basic ergonomics training, like stand up, go take your laptop to the kitchen counter and move a little bit. Go outside, get some fresh air, add some plants or an aquarium into your home office to help you with stress. Like really simple things, or practices around making sure you pick up the phone now and then and talk to a team member that you're just concerned maybe hasn't been heard from in a while. Like how we help people work from home is critically important to their well-being, which is critically important to organizational outcomes. And by and large, even the most progressive remote-first companies have just decided it's not their domain. Like we have this enterprise work-from-home program that allows for organizations to support their people with Aeron chairs and other things. But we also sometimes just get asked, like, but not very often, how can we make sure that people, are doing okay? And I'm just shocked that this percentage of a workforce's productivity has not gotten more support.
And what I really believe is that distributed ways of working are becoming a must. So making sure that our leaders, have these skills to build distributed teams is becoming just a must-have. So being able to develop relationship with any kind of talent, virtually or physically, being able to build a team that is running with digital first mindset, making information digital and researchable, being able to balance and be explicit and describe what we work. What needs to be done physically, what needs to be done virtually, or what needs to be done asynchronously. All of these things we've been talking about, are becoming a must now. So, and we have everything because we shared a lot on that.
In my day job in this space, I spend time. I'm the technology support guy, right? Where I try to keep technology running for people. And as everybody's gotten more remote, you don't have fail safes. You don't have multiple laptops, multiple screens, multiple printers. You don't have things around so that you can support it the same way. So when it goes down, when you lose connectivity, you're kind of out, right? We just saw it in Spain, right? They just lost power, and now you're out, right? So trying to figure out on our side, how do we predict problems with individuals' technology and remediate them through automation so that they never experience a problem? Our goal for anybody who's working remote or in a company for that matter is to get to zero incidents, zero downtime because we have predicted it all and fixed it ahead of time. So we spend a lot of time on that, which hopefully is something you never have to think about because it just keeps you from ever breaking, right? So, but I think that when you have that single point of failure now, it becomes more critical.
All right, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience.
Okay, we'll start back here. We'll come forward. Yep. Hi, I have a question about AI and how you mentioned like the org chart example. One of the things that has come up in my organization recently is we want to do more with AI and try to lean into it more. And how do we make our employees feel that we're not trying to replace them ultimately with AI? And that's more of just maybe like the touchy-feely part of it, but that's something we're kind of coming up against if you have any insight into that.
I can tell you what we do. I mean, we really use it to try to go after. I like just, Ryan, your example. Where are the things you're spending a lot of time, right, that are driving you, it's sort of slowing you down, and we can train something to do that work, and you can teach it to do that because we've never run out of things to do, right? So far that hasn't been it. But if you can take away some of these areas that just become something you can teach an agent to apply your thinking, right, that does help for big areas, but that's what we see anyway.
And I like how we say that we augment people. That's really what we do. And I recently read something from somebody from Microsoft who was saying that the next generation, they are going to be the CEO of their agentic startup. We will all be CEO of our agentic startup because we will all leverage our agents. That's the near future. Huh?
Did you say you have your own? Do you want to answer how you use it? You should give an answer. Say how you do it.
Sure. We built an agentic performance management system to make sure that the principles of performance are being applied evenly across your workforce. And so we integrate with HRIS systems, and we're seeing digital workers is, I think, the term that is probably going to end up being the, I don't know what the term's going to end up being, but they're on the org chart. They're held to standards, ethically, principally, all the ways that we want to be able to do that, and then we measure those agents, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll just tell you from our own learning, we pivoted away from referring to any sort of AI entity as an employee or as a worker or using any sort of anthropomorphic personification. It freaks the shit out of people, and it also creates a really weird dynamic. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Eliza effect, but when the first bot was created decades ago, people started asking it personal questions and wanted to rely on it. And you may have seen that more recently, people are seeking a lot of therapy from like the Snapchat bots or whatever, which is extremely dangerous in some situations. And so I would just maybe, again, I'm probably sounding like the Luddite here, but I would be a little careful to position these as tools to improve workflows. Like we use lean as an example in our manufacturing. If you look at how you make things in a lean environment, you look at where most frustration occurs for people, and you're like, we're going to find a way of taking care of that for you. If it's the same approach, like let's just take a look at your workflows. Tell me the part of your job you just hate. It's most likely what's going to trip you up. You just wish you could be done. Let's start there. Let's free you up to do some of the other stuff that you think you're really good at. Personally, I think that's the winning success for communicating it.
So I have the suspicion that as we sit here as a group, all of us talking about how fantastic this is, there's probably a conference somewhere where there's a group of people talking about how dangerous it is, and they're absolutely not going to get on the bandwagon. So what's the solution for broadening this way of thinking, or is it necessary to think in that direction and just let them do what they want to do? Because it does seem like there's a lot of value for just humanity instead of, well, it's just within our organization and we're happy with that. So how does one spread the word in a reasonable and successful way?
About the potential of remote, specifically?
No, specifically about the companies that are deeply entrenched in not acknowledging the benefits of remote and have that concept of it's arbitrary and we don't care. We want you in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Or we need to train our managers, but we've cut the training budget. And we know that that's going to be the key to making sure that you have more successful teams. So it just seems like there's two sides of the fence, and how do you win people over because it's the right thing to do?
I'll just tell you from my perspective, and we get all of this because as a company, we're helping to furnish offices for the most conservative New York banks, and we're working with the most progressive remote-first tech companies in the world. And there are many conversations where I hear somebody say something that feels draconian to me, where I'm like, ugh, and they think that I would somehow be in favor of forcing everyone to sit at a desk for 40 hours a week and not be able to move, and it's just not the case. There's a few different things that have come to my mind. For us, the best kind of way, and by the way, because I go to all the real estate conferences, et cetera, very few organizations are still that old school anymore. Most have embraced some degree of flexibility. They understand there's benefits. What I hear is not that there's an unwillingness, that it's so dang complicated. And they give up on the complexity of it and they default to what they know, which is responsible, in my opinion, for more of the return to office headlines than anything else. But if you're familiar with like Douglas McGregor's Theory X, Theory Y of management. I contribute to Forbes Monthly. I wrote a piece on this. We use it all the time. Basically, it's taught in every business school. McGregor said, some organizations view management as though people don't really want to do the work. The job of a manager is to make sure that they do their work and make sure that they're compliant. But a Theory Y manager thinks people want to accomplish important things, and it's the job of the manager to make sure that you align all the things needed to allow that person to get there. Most of the business schools have been teaching Theory Y management for a long, long time, and by reintroducing it, we might say, okay, you're looking at supporting more flexibility in your workforce. How does this align with your management philosophy? Do you think people need to be controlled and forced to do their work? Oh, no. Well, what does it look like to create some balance? And the last thing I'll say is, for us to be able to say, what does it look like for any person or any team to be achieving a balance that looks like I have better work-life boundaries, I have some flexibility, and I'm part of a high-performing, high-achieving team, is a really, really good approach. And that's way more interesting to me than the amount of time that we might spend in an office. I mentioned Lego when they introduced their flexible work policy. They basically sent a communication to their employees saying, we want to offer you more flexibility, but we have a social obligation to each other. You're part of a team. You need to look out for your team members. Who's new, doesn't have established relationships, who may not be participating in the way they'd like, who might be left out. Like, you need to show up for each other. It was way more effective than any of the return to office communications. It's like, we're concerned about what you're doing.